Leadership in war is a very difficult subject because one wrong move or one mistake could lead to the deaths of your soldiers. So how do you practice or strategize as a leader without putting your men at risk? Perhaps by playing a war game. A war game is a very specific kind of board game designed for strategists, for military leaders, for historians, and for anybody else who likes a sort of military challenge. And today's first impressions will cover the most successful commercial wargame, Axis and Allies. Hey all, welcome back to the Board Game Archives. We're currently working on a video that's going to be over 30 minutes long, so we wanted to create something in the meantime to help tie y'all over, and so we wanted to create a first impressions over Axis and Allies. Now, Axis and Allies is something called a war game. A war game is a very specific kind of board game that is typically used by military members, historians, researchers, and others who may be interested in the realm of military history. Now, our next video is going to be more in-depth about what specifically a war game is and how it's typically used, but today we wanted to look specifically at the most popular commercial war game, meaning the war game that is sold the most on shelves, Axis and Allies. As a very quick sort of introduction to the game, players will assume the roles of the 5 major powers of World War II, that being the United Kingdom, the United States, Germany, Japan, and the Soviet Union. Players could either use the game as a sort of visual guide as they research World War II. So, for instance, if players are researching a specific battle, they can move characters throughout the map to sort of visualize how the battle panned out in real time. Or, if they feel like playing around instead, they can create so-called alternate scenarios. For instance, what if major powers like the United States and Japan never joined the war? What if the Axis powers were joined by an unlikely ally, sort of like Brazil? Playing around with the rules and creating different sorts of alternate histories is really fun and really interesting to see because you get to understand how World War II could have played out, and doing so can help any sort of military leader or enthusiast better understand and obtain different skills of leadership. Alright, enough of me yapping, let's get into the game. The first thing you're going to see when you open up the game is the rulebook. Now, usually a wargame rulebook is very dense. They have a lot of pages, and the pages have a lot of rules. This is because, and especially in the wargames with multiple countries, there are all these different little things that you need to watch out for, and they all play into each other. For instance, with this specific game, Axis and Allies, piloting a plane is going to be very different than rowing a boat, or driving a tank, or walking across country lines on foot. And so you need to find out how each of these work, where each of these go, and how they interact with one another. Speaking of which, each and every country that I named, the 5 major powers, have their own little, like we say, monitos, these little characters. There are different types of boats, planes, tanks, and soldiers. They're each made out of this sort of hard plastic, almost as if they're 3D printed, and they're all color coordinated depending on their different countries. The specific colors are listed on the back of the rulebook, so you can always check back if you forget who's who. Now, this little divider here I'm not the biggest fan of. It separates all the different pieces from the board and the rulebook, but I don't feel like it works very well. It's very flimsy, and all the pieces are just sort of scattered about. So when you're done playing and you're ready to put everything back together, you kind of just slap it in there and call it a day. Plus, that little divider isn't the most sturdy thing ever, and so you just kind of see if you can fit it in. The rulebook and the game board both fit very well, however I am worried because they're both heavy, and I'm afraid that they may crush the divider and crush the things underneath. For context, here's another popular board game, Ticket to Ride. Notice how even though all the pieces are in baggies, much like Axis and Allies is, all of the individual baggies have their own unique slots. And so because of that, they each can fit much better. Plus, notice how comfortably the game board and the rules can sit on the margins of the box. You can't really do that with Axis and Allies, you kind of just gotta shove everything in and hope for the best. And so, while this is a very small nitpick, I know that organization within a box isn't really that big of a deal, my ADHD just wishes that it could have been a little bit more organized, much like Ticket to Ride is. Now, the quality of each piece is a bit of a mixed bag. We have these markers here that can help notate who controls what area of the map, and these are made out of cardboard, so they're not the most sturdy thing ever. But the other pieces, the planes, the tanks, the boats, and the soldiers are all made of a sort of hard plastic like I had mentioned, and so because of that, they all feel much better made. And so, mix that with the map, which is overall a very high quality. I would say that it's probably the best quality of any of the individual pieces. I feel that overall, the sort of construction quality of the pieces is quite solid. It's just that I wish the markers could be the tiniest bit more durable. Now, my personal favorite part of each wargame is typically the map, and so this map is just amazing. Notice how all of the neutral countries during World War II are sort of grayed out. Notice how the map is separated into individual regions, and how the oceans are cut up into individualized sections. This is a very key aspect of different wargames, of having the map separated into sections like that. Typically, it's a sort of hexagon shape, but in this scenario, they sort of follow the contours and the cultures of the land. It also helps with overall strategy. Let's say you're doing a free-for-all, you're not following the historical narrative of World War II, you just want to win. So you can decide, do you want to start, let's say, in Africa? Do you want to throw all care to the window and try and conquer Europe as quickly as possible? Your whole strategy can develop depending on if you're more of a fan of tank warfare, or if you'd rather conquer the seas first. And so I really like that about this game, because the entire point of it is strategy and improvisation. And so it really strikes a perfect balance between the two, and lets you explore the overall game. Now, one thing that will throw people off, including myself, is the length of the game. This game is 1 to 3 hours long. Now, I'm a historian, so I completely understand why it would be that long. However, if you're a family, or if you're trying to get a sort of board game night party going, 3 hours for one game is not something to scoff at. And so this is something that if you want to play, you'd better come in to play. So when we do a review on Axis and Allies, that time will really throw a wrench in the overall score of the game, because people can't really give up 3 hours of their day on a whim like that. That's something you have to plan for. Now, in my closing thoughts, I don't want to scare you off from Axis and Allies. I know I've been saying, oh, this game is long, it's really only for military leaders and historians and things like that, but it's also really fun to play if you're not any of those things, if you just want to mess around and see how world domination works. This is a very interesting tool that you can use to better understand history, because you can visualize and have a hands-on experience on how history played out during World War II, one of the most important parts of human history. The game does take quite a lot of time and effort to truly understand and be able to play through, so that is definitely something to look out for. However, if you're willing to put in all that time and effort, you will find that this game is, quite frankly, one of the best board games in the world. I would argue that this is one of the best games in terms of gameplay and replayability and things of that nature. You just need to have the sort of patience and understanding to play a game that is 3 hours long and spans the entire globe. So those will factor into the review when we make it. In the meantime, just sort of chew on that information if you're considering getting this game, and we'll get that review out for you as soon as possible. Axis and Allies is a joint venture between Hasbro, Renegade Game Studios, Avalon Hill, and Wizards of the Coast, and was created by Larry Harris and Jim Butcher. And one more time, thank you all so much for watching this far. It really, truly blows our mind how many of you are still sticking around with us after all these months. We're going to put as much energy and time and effort into these videos as we possibly can. And we're going to start jumping into the big boys, into the 30, 40, 50-minute videos if we can. And so stick around for those. We're still going to be making our quick 9 to 12-minute videos in the meantime. So we'd love to start creating new, fresh content for you, and hopefully you will come to enjoy it. So again, thank you so much. We really hope to do you proud with all the work we've been putting in, and we cannot wait to see you next time. Until then, take care!